I just gotten out of a little stint in jail for cannabis. At that time, the drinking age was changing, or planning to be changed to all ages. So I knew the kids needed a place to go play. So we got over there at 300 Luckie Street and put in a little small stage, put a little bedroom in the back and a shower, and I think the first band I did there was UK Subs. It was a sight to see, though. It wasn't really anything. We had a big screen TV and a couple stack of TVs and a stage with a PA. I guess after that we started getting all the local bands that were hoping to be punk at that time, and then we had Circle Jerks. And after about 2 years there, or a year and a half, the cops came and said, "Where's your permits? You know, what are you doing?" And I said, "What do I need? Permits? I'm just doing some shows." And they said, "Well, no, this is the last show. You have to have permits for this thing."
Ratlanta Punk Fest.
Okay.
Dropping back in time a little bit.
The Ratlanta Punk Fest. Well, Vince Hoffman, you know, he founded Ratlanta, which was an underground scene magazine. And of course, they wanted to support the movement any way they had and wanted to. And of course, the whole idea of the Metroplex is that it was a variety. To the punkers and hardcore scene, it was their club. And to the rock and roll crowd, it was their club. And to the heavy metal guys, it was their club. Because whenever they were there, it was full of their people. And so I basically had an open door policy. If there was a date available and you had a thing going or a scene going, and certainly at Ratlanta did, because Vince worked in our canteen there where we served hamburgers. He was my top cook for years in the Other Side Cafe. And that's what we named the bar, the Other Side. If you want to have a drink, you got to go to the other side. And so Vince had really gotten the magazine off the ground, and they had put together the Ratlanta Punk Fest. And I don't even know who played, but I'm sure it was a great show. You'd have to fill me in, Chris. But so many things happened during that period. I was primarily in charge of booking and advertising and construction. And when Steve came on board, he ran the bar and the facility. And we ran into a lot of people for a lot of different events. We started the first homeless task force thing with Driving and Crying. We had benefits for PETA, where the Indigo Girls played. And they'd always beg me to, or not beg me, but implied that they wanted to play. And I would always say, well, you know, I don't know if our crowd's going to want to see Indigo Girls, you know, but I was wrong, girls. And oh, shoot, then we started just doing, you know, we had an enlarged capacity, so we were able to compete with Alex Cooley and his crew at that time. And Steve and I had always wanted to do shows at Chastain, and we were blocked out from that. And so we wanted to give them a run for their money. So we started booking groups, you know, like Megadeth and Testament and all the local supporters like Hallows Eve. We, of course, got to open up. And we did Red Hot Chili Peppers, which had already played 688 many times. And Faith No More, Bad Brains, you know, on, Fishbone, and doing sellout shows, you know, 700 people. So mostly they called us. It was word of mouth through the groups themselves. I got tied in with the New York hardcore scene, you know, like Agnostic Front, and I did GBH early, and the people that were helping book the bands, those individual bands, San Francisco hardcore scene, MDC, DRI, you know, a ton of bands from out there, LA, Suicidal Tendencies. They called us. They didn't have the big booking agencies either, so they didn't have the internet. So, you know, really the big booking agencies like FBI and all came on the scene after the clubs were built. There was a couple big agencies back then, but doing hardcore, they, you know, basically nobody really wanted to do the metal or hardcore then. There's the so-called rock and roll clubs. You know, it was Southern Rock back then, and Marshall Tucker, and, you know, not knocking it, Atlanta Rhythm Section. And, you know, I loved the Agora Ballroom, saw what they were doing. Of course, we couldn't compete with that, but they were doing groups like Talking Heads, the Ramones, Joan Jett, the Blackhearts, and Steve had a lot of experience at that, in a small venue. Of course, 688 only held maximum 300 people, so we were jammed in there. And he'd done Dead Kennedys. I remember nights when I would have a sold-out show, and I'd be running down to do 688 to see the show, or I would do Meat Men, and he would do Meat Puppets, and we would both sell out. So we said, well, shit, we'll just combine it together. I mean, and try to bump it up a level and give them some competition. They called us. And whenever I got a lead, I think Steve and I were a little bit different booking than the other agents. Usually the agents would tell you what was popular. Well, we did our research. We played our tapes. We read the fanzines. People submitted tapes from all over the country, and we only chose I didn't care if they were just coming through. I wanted to know they could play good stuff. And so I played and chose bands based on what I liked. When I first heard Circle Jerks, I was just like, whoa, they got to play this. I don't know who they are, but they got to come. L.A. and all that. Of course, Charlie Harper and all those guys, they always were a kick. So really, we became friends. I mean, Faith No More lived at our club for like a week. And I don't know if the Butthole Surfers were in and out of there for months. And but they always sold the place out, the wacky, just crazy bands you wouldn't believe. But we did a lot of other bands that, Battle Zone, Paul Di'Anno, and Ronnie Montrose, and Alan Holdsworth, and we did Iron Butterfly on the Tuesday, sold out. I mean, I did Buddy Blues Bland. I mean, we just did everything. The Wailers, we had reggae. People thought it was a reggae club. I mean, I did every Jamaican reggae group that came through. I did Sunsplash twice outside. Once at Masquerade, which was Excelsior Mill. No, I guess it was Masquerade. Well, they opened the club. We couldn't even get a permit to get in. It was December, but we were ready with the main hall. And so I talked to the building inspectors and let me open the bathrooms from the outside. You could get right to one. And DDT, we turned this, it was a garage. So we opened the garage door, which was the back of the stage, and put the band the other way facing the street. And DDT played, And with Liars of Wade, I think they opened up. And we had about 200 or 300 kids because, we'd come over from Luckie and they were anxious. I mean, that's why they helped, I think, to build the place, because they were anxious to get their club back open. And so finally we got a permit. But DDT and I, the group, became good friends. Greg Somas lived downstairs here at my house, and Jim Young and Robbie Zinski, and all the group was just friends. So I liked hardcore. And my sound man at the time, John, really liked the band as well, and they practiced at the place. I mean, we also let bands practice, so we just became familiar with their music. And I had the luck and fortune to meet Nick Jameson, who did one of the songs I liked a lot, Slow Ride, by Foghat, which was a group, because I was into the rock scene as well. And he had a studio in his basement in Atlanta, and I said, we begged him, would you please record these guys? We could do it in one day. And he says, one day? I said, their songs are short. He went like that. I said, but they're weed heads. So you got a problem with that? No. He says, so we had them just practice like hell for a week or two. This was my first, well, it wasn't my first album. I'd worked with Messenger, which was a heavy metal band from South Georgia, who won 120 Minutes, if anybody remembers that. But they furiously practiced, and I don't know if anybody knows DDT music, but it was the angst thrash metal punks music of the day. I mean, it was just roaring. It was just roaring. But they were short songs. I think Axe Murder is like 38 seconds. And so, but they did a 4-minute song, The Vein, which could still kick today. We thrashed them out for 2 weeks, stoned them completely while they were playing their music. And so then, of course, they couldn't get any pot for a few days before the studio session. And I slammed them in there and gave them some pot just before they started practice. And I think they recorded the album like in 8 hours. Nick says, I have never seen a band record a show so fast. And so, that's how we did it. And so that was the first album from Railroad Records. And then I put out 2 albums with HR, who'd become a friend. Before I even opened the clubs, I was doing music with the Yippies from 74, 75 in front of the White House Lincoln Memorial, like Fear. And so I knew about the punk scene already. And HR and the Bad Brains have become friends of mine from like 77 or 78. And HR lived here at the house. And so when he left the Bad Brains, I was there in the tour bus alone with him when he was going to the hotel saying, I'll never play Bad Brains again. And she says, Paul, would you help me do we want to do a HR Human Rights Band, which he'd had as a side project under Olive Tree in D.C. And I took the record label one more step up and got serious. And so we did HR albums. First album, I Love, which has Who's Got the Herb on it, and other great songs, I Love. And then I started managing the group for 2 years. We did 3-4 tours. And we had the opportunity to get a scratch track from SST Records, because I guess they were having trouble with HR, but they put a 60-cycle hum through all these tracks they had with Ross Michaels from Sons of Negus and Earl and HR, and I listened to it and I said, sure, I'll buy it. I guess he thought I was going to buy a poke, and I knew it was something. So we got the tape, took the 60-cycle hum out, and it became Our Faith, which is to me, the best thing I've ever worked on musically. And and since then, of course, Bad Brains played for me many, many, many times before that.
Let's see.
So Neon Christ started opening up for all these shows, Bad Brains, Red Hot Chili Peppers, because we had them quite often. So we'd rotate our best friends, which were Neon Christ and DDT and others. And Neon Christ, they had played around the clubs, but these kids took it on their own to adopt the club they, I guess, felt most comfortable in playing, and their friends followed them. And without the local scene involved in the clubs, they're really sterile, I think. So I've never been a groupie. I started doing music when I was a freshman in college, and the first bands I put on stage at the University Union were Strawberry Alarm Clock and Big Brother and the Holding Company. So, I was familiar with, I was not starstruck until I met Steve Marriott in Buckhead, who lived there, because Humble Pie had written one of my favorite songs, 30 Days in the Hole. And, but that, later I lost awestruck about Steve and we just became friends. But, I'm not very often I'm more of a fan of the music rather than the celebrity. And the bands recognize that. And well, the Skinheads, of course, had
Them as an element.
as well as an element of the punk scene, which was mostly Mohawks, and it was definitely integrated black and white. The Skinhead scene came along a little after that, and they, of course, adopted the club as their own as well, because I had Skinhead bands playing, like Agnostic Front and DRI and MDC, who were cross-punk hardcore, but the hardcore scene was coming in. And they were hard to handle sometimes. If anybody's had to deal with some skinhead, we had our own local skinhead bands like Anti-Heroes and just a few. The Misfits were basically hardcore. And Murphy's Law came and played a lot, and they were the DC scene, and all the cities knew each other. So when skinheads came into town, they knew where to go and hook up and meet everybody, and they adopted it as their own. Well, the club grew a reputation as being a hardcore club because, well, nobody else would book the hardcore bands or have the hardcore scene in their club, partially because they were trouble. More likely they had a reputation that was larger than their own self, because I was never intimidated by any of the skinheads. They were all nice kids. I knew them personally. So they really had, there was a couple bad apples from out of town. But anyway, they did rent the warehouse across from the Metroplex, and we did off and on have a little bit of a confrontational problems because the club was so many other things than hardcore. We'd have rock and roll. We hosted the first Freaknik there from up the street until it got too big. It was out in the street, and then they had to go somewhere else. And in fact, my guys hated working that. They said, Paul, because it started as a gay black thing. And no objections, but it just grew and grew into what it was. And then so many things had come out of the variety of music. That's what I was into, the variety. I like all kinds of music, so each scene had their own cult.